Welcome to Mandibil. This is part 2 of my deconstruction of Keith Frankish course on illusionism. And we are sort of 12 minutes and 35, or circa, that's the word I was looking for. Is it called circa in English? They're about 12 and a half minutes into in the part 1, and we are sort of going to head out. I've had a long day. I've been, working hard for, 8 hours or something and 2 hours of commute since early morning. But still, I have energy to, entertain my listeners. We need to get through this deconstruction. And if you want to join me, you're more than welcome. So let's see what he says. Good old Keith.
Okay, well, let's move on to consciousness itself then. I want to begin by stressing that illusionism isn't the claim that consciousness isn't real.
Okay, so if you're saying that the qualia is an illusion, and you're saying that consciousness, you're not saying that consciousness isn't real. That must be the same as saying consciousness is real. So if something isn't an illusion, it must be real. Is that, well, it's just, it's also, one of these hallmarks of people who are not really, that coherent in their philosophy. They want to use these words in a confusing manner. So you're sort of putting your guards down in order to try to understand it, and that lures you into the language, and you're sort of potentially being absorbed by the thinking or the words, right? Instead of being very clear and sort of disconnected in a way from your explanation, so that it's sort of on a neutral ground, you're describing things, your philosophy, rather than sort of, I'm saying this, but I'm not saying this, I'm not saying consciousness isn't real. No, but then say what you are saying. Don't say what you're not saying. It's these sort of gymnastics of language that annoys the frick out of me, right? It is so prevalent in so much philosophy, and it sucks big time, right? Why can't anybody be, straight and to the point? Why does it have to be so convoluted, right?
Illusionists do reject a certain conception of consciousness. So they do say that consciousness, as certain people conceive of it, isn't real. But they don't say that consciousness in an ordinary, everyday sense isn't real. And so let me begin by saying what this ordinary, everyday sense is, the sense in which illusionists are quite happy to say that consciousness and conscious experience are perfectly real. Okay, so when you attend to an object perceptually, when you look at something attentively, or listen to a sound attentively, or smell something, or taste something with attention, you focus on it, then you have a conscious experience of the thing you're attending to. So here, as you're having a conscious experience.
So I have a conscious experience of the qualia? But it's an illusion? I mean, oh, maybe I should, just wait before. But it's like I have to sort of. The way I'm doing this is I'm thinking out loud as I go along, and if I feel that there's something that is weird or doesn't make sense, or it actually makes sense, maybe. Well, I'm stopping and quoting. I can't sit here, listen for 10 minutes, and then sort of think of what he's been saying the last 10 minutes and, divulge that and come up with some clever, reaction to that. I have to focus on the actual thing that we're talking about right now, right? Compared to what he just said 1 or 2 minutes ago, right? So, okay, if I'm tasting, seeing, smelling or something, those are qualia, right? So I'm conscious of the qualia. So I must have the qualia. Maybe that makes sense, actually. If you say the qualia is an illusion, that's not the same as saying that you're not having the qualia. That I just realized that. If you're saying they're an illusion, you're referring to some kind of experience or qualia. You then classify as an illusion. Okay, so far so good. Okay, maybe I've been a little too harsh on his thinking here, right? So if he's saying qualia is an illusion, you have to refer to something that which you call an illusion. So you have to be conscious of your qualia. Okay, so far so good.
Of the redness and the shininess and so on. And during conscious experience, your senses provide you, or perhaps we might say your brain, with information about the object.
Okay, so now we're getting into some serious stuff, right? During conscious experience, are you saying that the experience is the qualia? Or that you're showing a picture of what I would objectify as an apple, even though I know this is not a real apple, but it's sufficient in order for me to objectify apple, even though I can say it can't be an apple because it's small and I lick it, doesn't taste like an apple, right? So, and it's on my computer screen, so to say. But is it the qualia or the object that is the experience, or both, right? Because I would say that apple is not an experience. It's not something that is X, meaning something from the outside, right? Even if you say that your experiences are on your inside, your qualia or on the inside, it's the closest you have to the outside. Direct experience of, let's say, right? So the object apple comes from the inside. So you're calling potentially the objectification, the cognition of the concept apple, an experience or what? You're just confusing. Why are you showing an object rather than just a color, right? Or some splashes of colors, right? You can't show tastes and smells and feels, right? You can show maybe sounds and colors, right? Maybe that's actually an interesting point. I just realized that what if you couldn't conceptualize what goes on a computer screen without you being able to taste it, right? So it seems that feels, tastes, and smells, and to some extent sounds maybe. Sounds are important in order to get the picture of things. It seems weirdly sterile if there aren't sounds. But nobody is missing smells in their computer experience, right? So, in my thinking, sight must be the most important in this categorization. Sight must be the most important qualia, right? Then comes sound, and then maybe, feel, taste, smell, feel, and taste, maybe, right? That might depend the last three, right? It depends. If you're eating, it might not be the feel, but rather the taste, right? Maybe the look of it, I don't know, right? They sort of complicate this. But what I'm struggling with here is, during conscious experience, your senses provide you with information. Okay, he uses the term, I didn't see that, about the object perceived. Now, there's a lot of things thrown in there all of a sudden, right? Conscious experience, senses, providing you with information, objects, and perception, right? That's a lot of things stuffed into one sentence, right? That you need to clarify what the hell you're talking about, right? How do you know that your senses provide you with information? your senses provide you with qualia. They don't provide you with information, right? And you are basically saying that your senses give you the apple, right? But that's not correct, right? That's ridiculous. You're saying that the apple arrives through your senses. No, mate. The apple is a conceptualization that comes from the inside. It comes from your awareness of your experience. Your experience is, combined in such a way that your awareness objectifies this particular, blemish of combinations of qualia as an apple, right? The apple does not arrive through your senses, right? You don't have an apple sense. You don't have an elephant sense, right? The apple comes from the inside. And you're calling it from information? How do you know it's information? It's like something outside the benevolent demon, Decon's the benevolent version of the external demon is handing you, saying, this is what you should know about the outside. Is that what you're saying? How the hell do you get to the conclusion that it's information? It's just like, this is how it is. This is ridiculous, man. You have to argue for this. You can't just state it, right? Maybe it comes later, but then you're just sort of, oh, very nice about the old woman, and then, you're stuffing, 7 different important philosophical, ideas in one sentence, like slipping in under the door, right? Consciousness, experience, senses, information, object, and perception in one sentence, right? God damn it, man.
You're attending to. In this case, your eyes and your visual system are providing you with information about the color and the...
I can't get the sound up louder. I would have to the recording software here. I have gone to the highest level I can do without getting this feedback problem in the sound, right? And he's so subdued in his voice that sometimes it's hard to hear what he's saying. So I'm not excusing for him, but I'm excusing that I can't record it at a better level than. So I hope you have to sit in a quiet room, right?
The size and the shape and the distance, the texture of the apple.
Texture, right? That's not something that arrives through your senses. What color does texture have? Right? What sound does texture have? What smell does texture have? So it doesn't arrive through the senses, right? It's something that your mind adds to that particular aspect of your experience, that particular set of qualia. Why is this so hard to understand? Right?
Or the image of the apple. And as well as attending, as well as having experiences of things in the world around us, we also.
What is the world around us? You're dealing with metaphysics here, right? The qualia is not just some interesting little aspect of your weird mind thing. This is metaphysics. This is the qualia is basically everything you have, right? Apart, of course, from your conceptualizations or what your cognitions like elephant and apple and so on, and your emotions, your feelings, desires and so on, right? Your whatever dreams and all this, right? But that's always some kind of derivative of either an immediate impression, an immediate set of qualia, or a memory of qualia, right? Or inductions made from prior experiences or memories of prior experiences and whatever, right? Or maybe even, genetically, how the concepts form in your mind in order for you to be able to identify apple or cognize apple, right? is something that is carried over through genetics and evolution, whatever, right? But that was also based on some kind of experience, right? So it's just like, it's another case where all sorts of things are all of a sudden taken for granted. And sort of this high-flying philosopher possibly has 6 or 7 PhDs and been studying for 50 years or whatever, I don't know, right? Can't see his way to sort of explaining the basics he uses in order to argue for this kind of metaphysics, right? So it doesn't, it doesn't sit well with me already, right?
Have experiences of the state of our own body, of events in our own body. So if I ask you to attend to what you are feeling in the lower part of your left leg right now, you might find that you're aware of a stiffness or an achiness or a strain or some discomfort or an itchiness or something like that. And if you do, then you're having a conscious experience of those things. And again, the experience is providing you with information about the condition of your leg, of the muscles, of the skin.
That's an interpretation. You are interpreting a qualia. It's not information just by you have an experience, then you're calling it information. Just you labeling it as information doesn't make it information. Information is something that is upgraded to some kind of purpose or meaning or something like that. Meaning doesn't arrive through the senses. You are attaching meaning to it, right? There might be something that sort of is have a what's it called, gut reaction. If a monkey comes flying towards me, I might be defending myself without being sort of very conscious about my emotions to defend myself. But it doesn't mean that it's defined as information just because I have that experience. You, as a philosopher, needs to clarify how you get to the label information, right? Because information is a kind of knowledge, or at least something that approaches knowledge, right? So you're also dealing with sort of epistemology here, just sort of on the fly, apparently, right? It's not good enough, mate.
Or whatever. Some interesting things about conscious experience. You can tell conscious experiences, you can tell introspectively when you're having one. That is to say, you don't need to work out that you're having a conscious experience by observing your behavior or signs, indications that you give, as you would need to.
You need to clarify this conscious experience. Do you have, are you talking about being conscious of an experience, or are you saying this experience has consciousness to it? A conscious experience, are you saying it's the consciousness part of it I'm referring to? Me being conscious is important, not that which I'm conscious about. That's just, if that's the case, it's a little strange. Why would you need to be conscious about that which is you should eliminate, which is your qualia, as you have stated, apparently, right? So don't you need the qualia of this apple you're showing in order to get to the awareness or the consciousness of apple? If there's no colors, there's no sounds, and no taste, you will not be aware of the apple. You won't be conscious of the apple. Even if it were there, if you have none of these qualia, there's no apple, right? So how do you get to the apple without the qualia? Kind of an important question, right?
To say, tell what your blood pressure is. You can't just tell introspectively what your blood pressure is. You have to notice the signs, feeling flushed or whatever, or take a test. With conscious experience, you can just tell straight off that you're having one. If you ask yourself, am I having a conscious experience of or what am I having a conscious experience of right now? The answer just comes to you immediately. Doubtless there are processes involved in your brain in bringing it to you.
But the answer comes. I didn't get that. Okay, I'll let that pass.
Immediately, but you don't have to do anything to work it out. At a conscious level, it just comes to you automatically, it seems. And that is sometimes called introspection. You can sort of look inwards, introspect, and see what's going on in your own mind, as it were. And introspection of this sort provides you with information about your experiences and enables you to compare them with each other, to say that, for instance, this experience of the colour of the apple is somewhat like the experience of seeing a postbox or a fire engine, and a bit like the experience of seeing an orange, but very different from the experience, say, of seeing a clear sky. It enables you to recall. You're able to recall experiences and to describe them.
Recall experiences? Do you mean you have a memory of an experience? Yeah, but that's not an experience, right? A memory of an experience is not an experience, right? Just like a photograph of the moon is not the moon. Or a picture on your presentation of an apple is not an apple, right? So you're comparing memories of experiences with experiences? Well, there's nothing wrong with that. Just point out that you're talking about two different categories here, right? It's almost like a different paradigm. The immediate experience and comparing to an earlier experience, which is a memory of an experience if you no longer have that experience, right? Or that cognition, if you're talking about, for instance, an apple. So you can compare that and say, that's also an apple, just like the one I experienced yesterday. Yeah, but you're not comparing the experiences. You are comparing the objects, right? You can say, I compare the objects, and I can say, I can compare them because they are of the same object. But they don't need to have the same colors or the same smells or the same taste and so on. It could be a green apple and a red apple and a big and a small and, whatever. It could be oval or round or, whatever. Doesn't have to be the same experience, but it can still be the same apple. I have some green, what are they called? Granny Smith, I think, apples out in my kitchen. They are completely green, right? But this is a red apple. So it's a different experience. So yeah, you're comparing the experiences, but why are you comparing green to red? Well, the only reason you're comparing these two colors is because they are referencing the same object, which is apple, right? You are actually not comparing the experiences. You are comparing an experience and a cognition of an apple with a prior cognition of apple, which references a particular color that you also remember, right? So, just be careful with this, right? This is very important to be strict about how this is. You can't just, and then you can recall it. It's sort of just, it's a sort of Sunday school, adventure of some kind, right? It doesn't sound like rigid philosophy where you, go to the utmost to make sure that you are not misunderstood and you are dealing with strict delineations of when you're talking about this, that, and the other, right?
Say whether they were pleasant or unpleasant and so on. You have a lot of information about your own experiences that comes through introspection. Now, I take it all that is uncontroversial.
By the way, I could mention that in my recording software, I'm using something called Streamlabs Desktop version 1.8.4. That the video is sort of jittery in the recorded version over on the version of the presentation of Keith Frankish here, right? while the YouTube video is sort of smooth, right? I have fiddled about trying to figure out if I could make a better version of it, but it seems, and I'm also afraid that I'm going to touch something that is going to make it even worse, right? So it's sort of, if it works, don't fix it, right? I'm a fairly big proponent of that principle. Okay.
I think there's nothing there that...
Or maybe I should say, if it works sufficiently well, don't fix it.
An illusionist would want to deny. Now, we can contrast conscious experiences like that with what we might call non-conscious experiences. Now, you might think that the notion of non-conscious experience is contradictory, that experiences are conscious by their very nature. Well, that's a common way of using the term, but we can certainly...
I'm already getting, a bad feeling about this. Non-conscious experience? Well, yes, if you mean by consciousness the awareness of your experience, right? But it's these labels or terms used, right? Consciousness, sometimes people use consciousness in the same fashion as other people use the term mind. So it's just, in my opinion, it might be a good idea to get a grip on definitions of these terms before you even venture into talking about it, right? Saying, when I talk about mind, I mean this, and make a sort of a drawing. And when I talk about consciousness, I mean this part, and the experience is this part, or something like that, right? Just to make sure that people are not, screwing up their understanding of what you're talking about. Now, if, for instance, I remember when I was a child, I grew up in the countryside. Sometimes I would always, venturing out, looking for frogs or walking around in the woods or fishing or all sorts of stuff, right? Walking around in the fields looking for old Stone Age tools. There were actually quite a lot of those in the ground in the spring. It sort of came up of the ground there for a reason we could go into another time, but looking for old scrapers and maybe even a flint axe. I found a couple of those also, right, when I was a child. That was sort of a treasure hunt. But I remember sometimes if I was walking through tall grass or something, I might have got a rift on my lower leg somewhere, and it started bleeding, but I wasn't aware of it. Until later, when I was sort of, scratching myself and figured out, well, there's blood there, right? Where did that come from, right? And then I saw I had a rift. And when I was sort of focusing on it, just like Keith mentioned before, I would actually be aware of there was actually a pain. And I remember sort of slightly ghostly that I actually felt that pain earlier, but I was never fully aware of it, or never aware in a way that I would sort of stop and say, well, I have to fix this wound or whatever, right? So you can have experiences that you're not aware of, right? Or you can say, it's highly unlikely that which I refer to as a memory of something that I wasn't really aware of was not something that I could have been aware of, right? But as we are talking about before, memories and experiences is not the same. A memory of an experience is not an experience, right? And these are also very strict delineations you need to have in your epistemology, right? This is sort of the idea of empiricism.
We can certainly identify episodes that are like experiences, like conscious experiences in some ways, but aren't conscious. What I mean is there are episodes where our senses provide us with information about the world or about our own bodies without our having an associated conscious experience.
The
what? Clearest
Say what? Your senses can provide you, apparently not necessarily, with information. So does it have to be more than one sense, or all the five senses, or just one of them? So if I have a smell, that's an information. How do I know it's an information? I just said it was a smell, and now I'm starting to also call it information. What is information about it? Why do you upgrade it without stating what makes you able to upgrade it all of a sudden to something you call information, right? Can provide, so it doesn't necessarily provide. How do I know when it's information and it's not information? It's just a smell. This smell is not information, but this smell at this point, what's the criteria, right? About the world. What is the world? Without you having a conscious experience. But do I need to be conscious of the experience without? I mean, it's like, okay, I need to be conscious of the experience. So, but I'm not necessarily conscious of the experience. But if I'm not conscious of the experience, it can't be information, because you're saying, no, you're not saying that. You're saying your senses can provide you with the information about the world. What world? Is that something that is outside your senses? So something is going on outside. There's some existence out there, and some reflection of that arrives through your senses, and then the senses re-establish that existence, apparently one-to-one, so that you know that that is the same as that which is out there, or what? How does the senses know what is out there if the senses didn't get what it is? It's not like the cow or the apple arrives through your senses, right? There's not an apple traveling through your eyes or your ears or your nose organ, right? Is there? So it's not the real. If there's something outside, it can't be the real apple. Otherwise, you will have the whole universe inside you. And all 8 billion people in the world would have the same copy of that same universe. So there are 8 billion copies of the one-to-one copies of an outside world inside 8 billion people. Does that sound crazy or what? What is the world? If you're not experiencing, you can have an idea of a world without being conscious of it. How the hell does that work? Don't you need to experience, right? Your senses can say, yeah. You don't have to have a conscious experience. So you can close your eyes and your ears, and still the senses will tell you about that world. How the hell does that work? I don't get it, man. What's the matter with these people, man? Why aren't they being defunded and told to go out and do something constructive in the world where real people are, right? Okay, then subliminal perception, blindside, unconscious driving. Nah, but you are not unconscious, right, when you drive. You are just more like subconscious, right? You're not fully aware, but you're still sort of on an autopilot awareness, right? You're not completely unconscious. You're just not sucking everything in a sort of a direct live show of some kind, right? It's sort of the mind's ability to get to a lower energy level in order to get through. You don't need to do the same kind of deep awareness when you're driving to work for God knows what time, for what number of times, right? So just be careful with this. This is an area that is so ripe with misguidance or sophistry or manipulation or misunderstandings or just jumping to conclusions. It is a minefield of things that can possibly go wrong, right? Just be very, very aware of this, right? And don't take my words as any kind of gospel, right? Do your own freaking thinking, right? Please do your own rigid thinking.
Example of this is what's called subliminal perception. And this is something that's fairly easy to demonstrate in experimental settings. It goes something like this. An experimenter will flash an image in front of the subject's eyes for a very short period of time, for a fraction of a second. If they get the timing right, the subject will say that they didn't see it. They didn't have a conscious experience of it at all. But still their visual system will have taken in some information about it, enough to affect their subsequent reactions. And you can show this by testing the subject later.
Yeah, they exchanged a picture in olden days in the movies, in the old film reels. They exchanged one frame with Pepsi Cola or something like that, right? And it's just switched in 1/24 of a second or something like that, right? And people did sort of, oh, what was that? Oh, probably nothing, right? But the mind remembers Pepsi, and in the afterwards they will go out and buy a Pepsi, right?
Later. So, for example, if you flash an image of a camera before a person's eyes, just for a fraction of a second, so that they don't consciously see it, but then later give them a word test where they have to complete a word beginning with the letter C-A-M. So they will tend to choose camera rather than any other word, rather than say camel. Whereas if you had flashed an image of a camel before their eyes again without them seeing it, without them consciously seeing it, they would tend to go for camel. So at some level, the image had been registered and information about it extracted and was available to affect, and it affected the subject's later responses, even though they didn't have a conscious experience of the image. So there's a kind of unconscious, non-conscious perception, non-conscious seeing, if you like. Another very striking example is blind sight, which is a condition where a person has suffered damage to to part of their visual cortex in the brain. Their eyes are still functioning normally, and so are parts of their visual system, other parts of their visual system, but the damage is such that for an area of their visual field, the subject seems to be completely blind. They say they just can't see anything in that region. Nevertheless, we can show that it can be shown that they are still receiving some information. Their brain is still receiving some information about what's in that region. As I said, their eyes are still working and other parts of their visual system are still working. So if you present to them an image of a line, say that is either horizontal or vertical, and ask them which it is, they will say they can't see it. But then if you ask them to guess whether it's horizontal or vertical...
Yeah, but this is all this... You can go into this rabbit hole of it's the wheels or the carriage that goes backwards, because the mind tries to make sense of this. The spokes in wheels and carriages have only been there for 1,000 years or something right? While the mind has been working for hundreds of millions of years trying to make sense of the experience, or conceptualize or cognize, objectify the world. And sometimes it doesn't really work because the mind is not geared toward that particular, when you have parallel lines and crossing, it looks like they're no longer parallel and all that, but you can sort of see they're possibly parallel, or, the stick in water. There's all sort of aspects where the mind apparently tries to make sense of this in a way that is just weird. That doesn't really prove anything, right? The mind does the best it can in order to make sense of what it's got, right? We may only be sort of 5% toward a perfect, or something you could call a near perfect objectification of our experiences, right? The way our experiences are put together might change, and the way we cognize from that experience might change, right? So there are all sorts of aspects, and also, evolution of this whole cognitive apparatus that might have, confined it to what makes sense to have experiences, cognitions about, which is survival, maybe, right? And all other kinds of bullshit you don't need. You're not experiencing it because you don't need to, right? And talking about that world, it's information about the world as if this is given. The world is given, right? This is a materialist, physicalist fallacy. You do not have access to an external world, right? You have an experience of it, at most, and that's your qualia, right? So, it's just
Cool. No time to get right.
Same old fallacies, right? Bad metaphysics.
And this can, the information from the blind region can also guide their responses. So if you throw a ball to them in that area, they will tend to catch it instinctively. Again, guided by information that is getting through, that is that the visual system is receiving and that is making available to certain other systems without their having any conscious experience of it. Another perhaps more contentious example is unconscious driving or unconscious performance of any routine activity. If there's an activity you're very practiced at, you can often perform it without attending very much to what you're doing. I think we've all had that experience of driving, if you're a driver, while you're thinking about something else perhaps, or having a conversation, and not really attending to what you're doing, nevertheless you're driving perfectly well. And clearly your eyes are taking in information about the road, and it's being used to control the movements of your hands and of your feet and so on. Now, whether this really does involve whether the visual experiences here are really unconscious or not, it's difficult to say. But we do have this experience often of sort of coming to and finding that we really don't have any recollection of the last few miles that we drove. So again, here's something like a kind of unconscious experience, even if it's not fully unconscious. So this gives us a way of defining consciousness in a kind of neutral way. We can say that consciousness is whatever it is that makes the difference between something like subliminal perception or blind sight that really is not conscious and attentive perception of the sort when you're looking at the apple, say, or attending to your leg. And I think we can all agree that in this sense, consciousness is real. There's a difference here, and it's a real difference, and we need to explain what it is. Though it should be added, it may not be just one thing. There may be lots of different processes that are involved in conscious, fully conscious experience. Now,
I was just sort of almost falling asleep there. Yes, such an hypnotic, nursery rhyme kind of. We might define consciousness as whatever makes the difference between attentive perception and subliminal perception. Okay, so if you are directly aware, okay, I am driving and there's a tree there and there's another car there, you're sort of aware, right? Strongly aware. Then that is consciousness. But you might also be subliminal aware that if you try to recollect your driving, I was driving home today, what did I experience? I was sort of in my driving mode, autopilot, right? I might be able to point out, yeah, there was this weird car that did this, right? There was actually a situation with somebody with road rage. I don't know what's going on with these people, right? They don't have a life. It's like I might have done something that I would too close to for their taste, or did something that I wasn't aware of. I was going in, get what's it called when you get ahead of somebody, and then they sort of follow you for 10 kilometers or 10 miles or whatever, right? And then they sort of and then they can sort of drive around you faster, and then blow the horn, and then sort of, and then they possibly sit there. I told him he's an asshole, right? These kind of people, right? I mean, oh God. But I can't remember much of my commute today, right? Sitting in my car. So sure, but so my consciousness is only that which I was aware of directly, and I can recall now saying, oh, there was this car that did this, or that person in the car did, right? Using the car to do it. So that's consciousness. But, what about the subliminal? Yeah, so it's more like awareness, because there's also this subliminal going on. Is this not some kind of consciousness? So it's sort of these lines between understanding what are they delineating, and what is inside and outside these categories. It starts to sort of float a bit, in my opinion, right? Too much for my taste. Everyone can agree, okay, that consciousness in this sense is real. But what does it mean that it's real? Right? I can't agree. Just saying everyone can agree. How dare you, man? Don't tell people what to do. Who do you think you are, man? Right? Everyone can agree that consciousness in this sense is real. And I would say that the only aspect I will call real is that which I have an immediate experience of, in the sense that I have objectified it or conceptualized it. The apple is real when I experience the apple, in a Humean sense, that it's the impressions, not the ideas, it's the impression that is real, right? I have an impression of apple. That is real. I have an impression of Keith Frankish, not on the screen here, but let's say I had that in real life, right? That's real. Consciousness is what you need in order to get to that which is real, right? Consciousness is not real. How can it be real? Because sometimes you experience something and then you figure out, no, it changed from an elephant to a rhinoceros, right? So did the reality just change from one to another? Or is it your mind that recognizes incorrectly and then switches things around? Right? What is real then, right? Well, you can say, at the point when I'm experiencing the elephant is real. When it changes to a rhinoceros at some other later point, which might happen, then rhinoceros is real. But you can't know whether you should experience one or the other. There's nothing that is information about it, so that you can say, in the sense that it must be the case. It's real because I experience it, right? There's nothing about it other than you can say, I experience elephant, or I experience rhinoceros, or I experience apple. That's what you have to go with, right? That's all you have. Then there's, I have to get rid of the progression bar. Though it might not be a single thing. I don't know why I can't get rid of the progression bar. Let me see.
You spoke there about conscious
Though
experience
it might
providing
not
you with
be a
information.
single thing.
Okay, so let's talk.
Everyone can agree that consciousness in this sense is real. though it might not be a single thing. Maybe I fell asleep. I don't know what he's talking about there. Okay, let's see.
Talking about a function of conscious experience, what it does, what it's for. Let's think a little bit more about this. Here's a very simplified picture of what happens when you have a conscious experience and what functions conscious experience performs.
No, the apple. There's no apple. You can experience apple outside yourself, right? If you're talking about experience as being inside your mind, then the apple can't be out there, right? Then it must also be in there in some way or another. This is an abstraction. You can't experience this. You can't extract yourself from your own experience and look at yourself from outside your experience. This is a fallacy, right? This is impossible. You don't have access to any apple out there, right? Your experience is inside your mind. That's where the apple is. You're just interpreting it as being outside yourself. But the experience is still inside your mind, otherwise you wouldn't have the experience. You're showing the qualia, a green leaf, a red color of the body of the apple, and what's it called? Stilk. Those are qualia. They are not outside your eyes, right? They must be on the other side of your eyes. Come on, man. I mean, you call yourself a philosopher? Holy crap, man.
So it starts with receptor cells in your sense organs reacting to physical stimuli. In the case of vision, the photosensitive cells in the retina of your eye fire in response to...
Physical stimuli? What's that? What's a physical stimuli? Is that photons? The apple is not, pounding on your eye, is it? So it's photons. So photons is not an apple, is it? So the photons travel through your eyes and then an apple appears in your mind? Well, then it's no longer outside, right? Then it's inside your mind. Don't you get this, man? You should be defunded immediately, man, right? You're confusing people. You don't know what you're talking about, man.
Light of different wavelengths hitting them. Different cells react to different wavelengths of light. In the case of other sense organs respond to other features, pressure waves in the air, for example, chemical compounds in the food you're eating, and so on. Then electrochemical signals travel along various routes to your...
Okay, so electrochemical signals is not an apple, is it? Okay, so does the electrical chemical has a little code that says apple that it carries along with this chemistry? That says when we get to that place in the mind, we have to recreate this chemistry as an apple so you can experience apple, right? Is that how it works for you? Because if it's just chemistry, there is no apple, right? You can't look at chemistry and say, oh, there's an apple traveling in through the mind there, right? You can't do that. And that's because the apple only appears, you only have access to when the experience of apple is the case. You have no access to what goes on before that. The mind creates something after the experience, where it presents to you the apple as being outside your mind, outside your head, right? But that's the mind's representation. It's the mind's way of trying to make some kind of sense of this experience, right? You have just trained yourself to work from the axiom that which you have an experience of must be outside yourself, outside your mind. But that creates a huge paradox that you need to identify, which is, if this hand of mine here is outside my head, I can't experience it, right? Because it needs to be inside my head in order for me to have an experience of it. So what the hell am I referring to? Right? How can I say it's outside my head if it has to be inside my head in order for me to have an experience of it? Well, the only solution to that is all of this experience is in here. The mind is just presenting it. I'm working in it as if it is an outside world. And it apparently needs to be interpreted that way in order for me to use it for something. Because if I don't take that leap or work from that axiom that it is a representation of an outside world, which I, by the way, do not have access to, just as Immanuel Kant says, I wouldn't be able to use it for anything, right? It would just be this weird theater that is useless in a solipsist world. But when I take the step and say it's an outside world, well, it can merely be a representation of something outside which I have no access to, right? Because I need an experience in order to have, the only thing I can have is an experience in order to have something to work from, right? Because it has to travel through my senses and all this bullshit. But the cow is not going through my senses, right? The apple is not pounding on my eyes or my ears at the same time and, my nose, right? You get the point? I don't know. Possibly not.
Brain. And their sensory regions, dedicated sensory regions, process these signals. There are specialized areas for detecting specific features such as edges and colors and so on. And this processing occurs in a hierarchical way with more and more complex representations being constructed.
To cut it short, he suffers from the materialist illusion, right? The materialist fallacy, that you are experiencing an outside world. That which you experience is the actual outside. And then he's saying, okay, and then the reflection from that outside travels through your... Why do you need that if you already know it's an apple out there? Why do you need to have your eyes then? Because you're saying, okay, and then the photon travels in and tells me there's an apple. Why? You apparently already knew there was an apple. So why do you need to have an experience of it also, right? That could possibly be incorrect, fallacious, or you might have think it was a baseball when it was actually an apple, right? So if you already know it's an apple, why the hell do you need the awareness or the consciousness of it? For some weird reason, you already knew it was an apple. And then the senses have to travel through and reconstruct that apple for some reason inside of you, right? Why? If you already know it's an apple. Maybe you don't already know it's an apple, but you only have the experience, and that's when you have something, but then it's inside your mind then, right? So all your experiences are inside your mind. That's where they are. When you say it's something outside, you can only claim as much as this, I think this is a representation of something outside. That outside you do not have access to, right?
So that you can, beginning with detecting simple features and resulting in your brain detecting specific objects and fate.
Okay, I think I'll stop here. There's 1 minute to the 1 hour mark. So it will upload on Odysee if it's shorter than 1 hour. So please share, like, and subscribe. Join the Discord and give me a comment. What do you think about this? What do you think about philosophy, my deconstruction and reactions here? And otherwise, have a very nice day. See you in the next part.